Hello, everybody. This is Greg Maurice, filling in for Paul Herman. This is Zaka Present My Journey. We are creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Tina Rodriguez, who's the Senior Director of Content Strategy and Acquisitions at Up Entertainment. Welcome to the show, Tina. Glad for you to be part of this conversation. Obviously, we've met, we've known each other for a few years now. So I want to
Yes,
thank you again, for being part of this conversation. And before we start, can you tell us about like a cultural background and also like where you grew up?
sure. And thanks, Greg, so much for inviting me. I'm honored. Like you said, we've known each other for several years. I've been a huge fan of yours and, great respect to you as a peer and friend. And so appreciate this very much. I grew up in Harlem. My parents and my two sisters, both younger. And it was funny because it was a really when you say Harlem, some people would think, "Ooh, Harlem," back in the day, like what was that like? But it was a really great upbringing, very much community focused, very much these symbols of people looking out the window, the grandmothers and so forth, and everyone knew when you got home, and if you did anything wrong, they'd tell your parents.
Exactly.
um,
Yep. Yep.
and so it was very much community driven, and grew up around a lot of love. My father's from, our family's from Puerto Rico, from Mayes. And so the family has always been really big. My grandparents had 16 children. And so whenever we went to my grandparents' house, there everybody was there. And so there's music and laughter, kids running around the house, kids falling down the steps, delicious food around the house, and just great times. So filled with love for sure.
Uh, I love it. I love the sense of community, and I can imagine back then in Harlem. So I love it. So obviously, you mentioned like the Puerto Rican culture. Like for you, like what does your culture mean to you?
Yeah, I mean it's who I am. It's what uh fills me up and gives me strength on the days that I'm feeling down or questioning myself, remembering where I come from, remembering this beautiful culture. You go to think of the Puerto Rican Day Parade, right? Like that energy, like that joy, that pride in the flag. That's what fills me up. That's my culture. And it's everything from um, the language to the food to the just how we go about things, how we walk in the world. It's very much authentically who we are, and it comes out of love very much. So
But growing up, obviously, like you this big executive working in entertainment. Like when you were young, did you know like you were going to be working in entertainment?
I didn't. I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I went to the University of Maryland, College Park. And at that time, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a journalist. So I was on like the paper, and I was taking journalism classes at the beginnings of. And then I took this elective, intro to film. And I thought, oh, this will be fun. You get to watch some movies and talk about them. I always loved television, loved movies as a kid. So took the class and fell in love with film and filmmaking. We studied various films from famous filmmakers like Kubrick and Spike Lee and Hitchcock, and so it was just my mind was blown. First time I felt what I call like the fire in your belly, where you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, the drive, like this is what I want to do. So from there, I switched my major to radio, TV, and film, and started taking film classes from there.
Oh, wow. When you had that breakthrough, how did you, I guess your family, your parents take that? Because they probably thought you were going to school to become a lawyer, and you made that switch. And how did they receive that information?
Yeah, so my parents, they never said like, what are you doing? That sort of thing. It was just kind of, they've always been very accepting of whatever I do. So they just were, said, okay. But when I got into the field and I would say, I'm doing this thing and I think it's really great. And they were like, okay. So it was sort of like, sort of like it was great, but they're like, but what do you do? What exactly do you do?
Right.
So now they know, but but yeah, they've always been so great. And as long as I was okay, they supported, they may ask questions,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
they
Yeah.
supported. Yeah,
No, no,
thankfully.
that's awesome. I realize like having the support at an early stage, like it's always very like
Mhm.
helpful in your career.
Yeah.
Like for yourself, when you first started in the industry, what was the biggest challenge that you faced and the biggest lesson that you learned?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge, I would say, was really just trying to get ahead, trying to have a voice in meetings, trying to be seen, because first of all, starting out, I was a coordinator, right, which
Mhm.
is a great position to be in because you obviously get to grow in it, and then eventually became a manager and so on, but when you're in those rooms, you don't always feel like you have a voice, like you're at the table, but are you welcome to speak? You're not always sure. Are people going to take you seriously or really try to, do the thing that you are suggesting? Not to say that a coordinator should be managing the network, but just saying like, you kind of felt like you're in line and you kind of have to go the course and don't don't go out your lane. It's like stay in your lane. So sometimes I think it was really hard to be seen in certain ways.
And how did you get out of that, or how did you learn basically like he had a voice and you should speak up? Is that through like promotions, or is there something that you learn? Did you learn that at an early age?
It was opportunities that did open up from some really great people, in some really important moments in my life. I worked at one of the networks that I worked at, the general manager there, he was producing some shows, some series that
Hmm.
were about African Americans in television. And as a coordinator, I was asked to join the task force, to talk about and figure out like what should this look like, right? So that was really the first time that I was asked for my voice truly at the table. And so that experience was really wonderful. Later, when I was, at Up TV, which was originally Gospel Music Channel,
Hmm.
and then rebranded to GMC, and ultimately rebranded to Up TV. And
Yeah.
while at Up TV, I'd been there 2 years, and we had this great opportunity to curate and build a new network called Aspire TV. And in that, it was another opportunity where I was at the table and spoke, and my voice was received, my thoughts were heard, the things that I wanted to implement were done, and that was based off of another, a great boss, someone who didn't have to, right? He could have gone somewhere else. He could have done it himself.
Hmm.
But he said, "Hey, Tina, I want you to do this thing." And so there again, being able to speak my thoughts and strategies and those things being implemented. So it's always been ultimately, Greg, someone else. I mean, I could have several other examples, but it's always been someone else reaching out and saying, hey, I think you could do this. Can you do this? Will you do this?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and saying yes.
Yeah. That's no, no, that's awesome. When you first started early, like in the industry, right? What was like the motivation, or even like your goals? Like, what do you think? Like, yeah, what was like the motivation, just to be in that industry?
Yeah, so it's so funny because when I graduated from Maryland, I at the time wanted to be a filmmaker and a director. So and I was living in Philadelphia at the time. So was working with other independent filmmakers and doing some casting calls, casting for films for some friends, and doing scouting and writing my own scripts. And we were on a shoot. This was for someone else, and it was raining, so we had to stop shooting. So there was like the school bus that we all like got on, and we're sitting there waiting for the rain to stop. And we had been there probably sitting for like an hour or more. And I'm sitting there and I'm just going, we're all trying to figure out who can buy our film, who's going to pick it up. And I said, who is that person that does that job? I said, I think I want to do that. And that was my, epiphany where I was like, okay, not going to be a director or writer. Love it, respect it, but I want to see what that other side looks like. And that's when I made the shift into network television, and even then I just wanted to be in the field, right? Was working with content that was general market, right? General market, not African American, not Hispanic, just like overall general market,
Hmm.
and knowing the content, growing up watching the content, loving the characters. This was at TV Land and Nick at Night at the time, and
Right.
so really really enjoying it. And then I think there was a time where somehow it might have been during that time when I was looking at when I was on that task force, and we were talking about bringing on a show, and some people we had conversations about it because some people felt like it wasn't something we should get and others felt like we should. And I remember thinking like, gosh, it's so important that someone that looks like myself is at this table right now, because you need that input, you need that perspective, whichever side you're on. It's so important. And that's from there. And then ultimately, as I worked at GMC, a gospel GMC up, and then ultimately Aspire, it was very clear that this was an opportunity that I could, make some important inroads in areas for content creators,
Yeah.
um, new voices, fresh voices, and so that has been. I feel like it's such a blessing to have
No,
come into this sort of role, to be able to make some impact in those areas.
no, for sure. It's funny how both of our careers like probably started around the inspiration, or even like how we got into the business, like the same. Because for myself, when I first started, because there was like so many different roles and opportunities in entertainment, right? Because I was trying to do
Mhm,
everything. I was doing marketing. I was
mhm.
producing, like directing, like whatever, editing. I was just like touching like so many different
Yeah.
uh post, and until I realized, like you said, when you met that person, like when it comes to a distributor, that person in charge, like basically like to put to make a decision for filmmakers, to help the filmmakers to put it out, then that's when I realized for myself, the industry, when it comes to especially black creators and the black
Yeah.
filmmakers, like they never had a lot of opportunity or places like they can go, like to showcase their talent, or even
Mhm.
like bring their films for people to help them. So that's how I basically like determined like I wanted to do that, and also like trying to help those young filmmakers, right? Because there's like so many young and talented filmmakers in our community, and
Yeah.
traditionally the gatekeepers, and also like the,
Yeah.
the bigger studios, they will never like give them a shot. So I can relate to your story, getting the industry. So obviously,
Mhm.
like when it comes to content strategy, that was in the media industry, like that's probably evolved for the past 20 years, especially with the rise of streamings and change in audience behavior? Like for you, what's been like your approach like when it comes to content strategy?
Yeah, it's you really have to be a researcher. You have to build your relationships. You have to know how to just sometimes you got to look under rocks and all sorts of things to find content. And then other times you have relationships that can, bring a lot of catalogs and libraries that are helpful to you in what you're trying to do around content acquisition. Uh, it's because of the space that we're in, and even though the industry's grown so much, opportunities are more than ever in terms of content creators. There's still a lot of challenges in having your work seen, in getting it into the right hands, in partnering with the right people.
Hmm.
And so for us, it sometimes it's a large catalog through a third party distributor, but sometimes it's just honestly going to a film festival, right?
Hmm.
And speaking to every filmmaker after their screening. Sometimes it's going to a convention or a market and meeting with not only the big distributors, but folks that have those little hidden gems. Maybe they
Hmm.
have 4 or 5 films.
Yeah.
Um, it's meeting people at festivals or at markets, and you're in line for a Starbucks and you're like, hello. And next thing you know, serendipity, you just met someone that you wouldn't have otherwise met that has series that could
Yeah.
work for you. So
Yeah.
it really is about tapping into all of these places, reaching back to folks that you worked with years ago and maybe somehow you were out of touch, and you connect with them again and turns out they have something. So relationships, critical, important, treating people right, all that goes into content acquisition. And then obviously when you get to the next stage of the negotiations and et cetera, there's another nuance to that. But certainly originally to originally go after that content, you have to be ready to dig
No, for
in our
sure.
world.
Yeah. Yeah. Treating people with respect or treating people right will always take you a long way, right? I
Yes.
can, I
Yes.
can attest to that. Why is diversity and storytelling important, and how can I guess the audience we request for more diverse contents like to networks or streaming platforms? Because I know sometimes a lot of my friends are always asking me, "Oh, Greg, I want to see more diverse content or more diversity in storytelling. Like, how can I basically like let the network so people know about that? Do you know? Can you tell us like why diversity is important in storytelling?
Yeah, I mean it's so important. It's critical to the lifeblood of America. It's that big, these stories, because that's what makes us all special. That's what makes us more accepting of each other, is the sharing of these stories of culture, of ethnicity, of experiences. I'm reminded of something that Denzel Washington had said. He was in an interview with other cast members of Fences,
Hmm.
and he was asked, why did Fences need a Black director necessarily? And he brilliantly spoke about how you could have another director such as Scorsese or Spielberg, right, do
Yep.
Fences, and it probably
Hmm.
would be amazing. But that cultural piece, that piece that, like, what it smells like when you're getting your hair hot combed. you know you know what it sounds like in the morning in the kitchen, or how people talk. Just it is you live it, you breathe it. And so something special, something that no one else can do, comes through, and a connection, a love, an understanding, an experience, attention, all those things come through in the story. And that's what makes that's what makes you love, right? That's what love the movie, the character, the actor, because they've touched you, they've met you in a place that is very private in terms of your life. And and when I say that, I mean like with the smell of the hair,
Yep.
hot comb, that's a very private experience, right? You didn't think
Exactly. Yeah.
about it. It wasn't,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, you're getting your hair hot combed, okay.
Well,
Oh, you got nicked on your ear, that happens all the time.
yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's that's what he is speaking to, and that's why it's so important, so important. And in regard to what can people do to see more of it,
Mhm.
there's a lot of things going on, right, that help us to either find more or less of that content. Um, on one hand, as we talked about, like streamers, there's a lot of streamers. There's a lot of streamers that have Black content, but do we know all the names? Can you find them? It's so much, right?
Mhm.
It's that it's hard to even find. You may go to Tubi, right? Because Tubi has a lot. You may go to, obviously, like you can find on Amazon and Netflix, right? The biggies. Then when you get to the smaller, like AspireTV Plus, our SVOD channel that launched in February, with Amazon, can people find it? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
The discoverability for those that aren't necessarily household names right now, can be a little bit trickier.
Hmm.
One of the best things I think that would help is, to go to the platforms that are focused on Black content that
Hmm.
you enjoy, to watch those. The industry is based off of what the platform's views.
Hmm.
So the views, if you viewed it, if you stayed the whole time, these are all metrics now that are looked at. And inside those companies, if they see that there's a steady stream of people watching it and finishing it, and looking for more content like that, there's a greater chance for conversation internally to say, let's look for more of that,
That makes,
So,
yeah, that makes
um,
sense. Like when it comes to the data, the companies will
yeah,
pay
yeah.
attention to that. Okay.
Data is king. Content is king, and data is king now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, as someone like deeply involved in creating diverse content, where do you see the future of representation and inclusion in media, especially executives? Where do you think it's heading?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that there's a bright future there. I think there are a lot of folks, that are in the field, behind and in front of the camera, um, that there will be opportunities where maybe they can then, come into, their own as an executive, not necessarily at a traditional network.
Hmm.
So much is changing, and entrepreneurship is, especially in the Black community, is like, if not an all-time high, certainly one of the greatest all-time highs.
Yeah.
And I was on a panel, at Clark University, and I remember many of the students there didn't want to talk about necessarily like a traditional cable network. They wanted to talk about their companies that they were building and how they were creating content. So I think that it won't necessarily come through the more traditional lanes, but in the future there will be, not network, content executives
Yeah.
that are Black and Hispanic and Asian and Native American and all of these other cultures that will be influencing what we see and driving what the larger companies are looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on that. I, I would say like, I know you, resume pretty impressive. Like, but for you, when you look at everything you've done in the industry, like, what is your like this the proudest moment and or achievement that you cherish the most in your career?
Yeah, I say, so I was thinking about that, and I'd have to say the night that we launched Aspire TV. This was June 27th. uh, 12 years ago.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
And
Pretty
it
big.
was, yeah, it was amazing because for like about 4 to 6 months prior to that night, we were just head down in the muck of it all, going home with bags and hair all messed up and just looking just a mess because we just were focused on getting this thing done. And that was the thing that kept us all going. um and it's not easy. It's not easy to just build and launch a network.
No.
And
Uh,
so
uh, uh,
it was an amazing experience and opportunity, and one that not many people have, right, to do something like that. So when we came to the launch party and we saw the content, right, I saw the content that I
mhm,
selected. The time that we launched was the time that I had recommended. Right, again, one of those things where I was brought to a table and they said, "What do you think? What time should we launch?" I said, "I think we should launch at 8 p.m. on June 27th." And you're like, "Yeah, okay, that's good." So, you're kind of seeing things that just you were doing in a little pocket, in a little place in Atlanta. And you see all these folks around the industry, celebrities. Mr. Johnson, Magic Johnson, was the original owner of the network and the reason that this even began in partnership with Comcast and several other partners. So you're looking around, you see the show that you helped develop. That's what premieres, right? That's the
mhm,
first image that people see of this network called Aspire. And you're like, wow, this is
yeah.
amazing. This
Yeah.
means something
Yeah.
to a lot of people. And how awesome is that, to do
Yeah.
something that means something to
Yeah.
people?
Yeah. I remember back then that was a big deal because I commend you obviously like for just being part of that because when it happened, even myself I was like, wow, like they're launching this network and also like what the network represents, some of the content that you created for the audience. So yeah, that's amazing, and also like commend you for that for doing that because a lot of us in the industry are still looking into that, and also like the success you've been having with the network. So uh,
Thank you.
thank you
Thank
for doing
you.
that. And my final questions for you, like, what advice would you give like to young professionals like from our community looking to break into media or the entertainment, trying to do content strategy or programming.
Yeah, there it's interesting because there's no content strategy, right? Classes in college, right?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's not as easy a lane sometimes, for the students that are coming out and looking for that opportunity. So, one, I would say, if you know what it is you want to do what's called content strategy. And content strategy essentially is, one, you have to watch a lot of content, movies, shows, shorts, and consume that and be a lover of it. Because if you don't
Yep.
love it, you're not going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
You want to study the streamers and study the networks. Everybody's plans in this industry are right there in front of you. You want to see how BET is doing their content strategy? It's right there for you to see it. You want to see what Bounce is doing? You want to see what Tubi's doing? Aspire TV Plus? It's there.
Yeah.
So ingrain yourself in understanding that. Then join some organizations. There are dozens out there that are, NAMIC, right? National Association of Minorities, of Multi-Ethnicity and Communications, WICT, Women in Cable and Television, Women in Film. I mean, you name it. Large organizations, small organizations, join them.
Yeah.
You meet people, they know people, and you hone in on where it is you want to go. Do informationals. I was blessed to call or email people that I did not know. They didn't know me from anywhere, and they said yes. And we had a call, and they were wonderful, and they were some of the biggest people in the industry. And they said, yes, call. You'd be so happy to see how many people are willing to share and give knowledge. Um, so those are some of the things. I could go
Nice.
on,
No, no,
but
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
yeah,
networking is very critical and important,
yeah,
and that was like
yeah,
probably one of the main reasons that I basically like created Zaka, even like the community
yes.
platform, like to access mentors of several people like
Mm,
from different industries. Like if you wanna basically like network and also ask for some tips and advice. Like so that was like the main reason for creating the platform. So yeah, I would agree to that. So yeah, Tina, I want to thank you again like for doing this because obviously like you know how much I love everything you are doing and building at Aspire
yeah.
and all the leaderships that you've shown in our industry. So I want to thank you for doing this. So if you want to hear about more inspirational stories like Tina, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow on social at Zaka Connect. Follow our feed at Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcast. Tina, thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you.